paradrama tales.
I was told Christmas was canceled, too expensive this year. But then I saw photos, every smiling face in matching pajamas, the dog decked out in its own onesie, gifts piled high under a blazing tree, my family celebrating without me as if I never existed. I answered my mom's text without hesitation. All right, and carried on as if nothing was wrong. I didn't push back when she said Christmas was off. I didn't ask for details or express disappointment. I kept my lights low, just a string framing the window, and pretended I was perfectly fine with a quiet one this year. Meanwhile, I quietly continued covering their rent shortfall each month, slipping the money into our joint account without fanfare or expectation of thanks. My sister's September loan went unmentioned after she borrowed it. I never asked for repayment, believing family trust was more important than a few $100s. So, when my mom announced too expensive, I assumed she meant it. I absolved myself of any hurt by reminding myself they were probably tight on cash. I even skipped the tree, telling friends I was taking a break from the holiday madness. On Christmas Eve, I reheated leftover pasta, watched Home Alone, and scrolled through social media, telling myself it was just another night in, but it felt hollow. I'd built up a narrative of quiet compliance. If they needed sacrifice, I would give it without drama. By Christmas morning, I was halfway through my third cup of coffee when I stumbled across that first photo family in matching pajamas, the dog in a green and red onesie, gifts stacked like an avalanche, and realized I'd been quietly sidelined. All my silent contributions, rent payments, loan forgiveness, emotional restraint, hadn't bought me a seat at the table. Instead, they'd taught my family they could exclude me without consequence. I felt each of those small, unspoken sacrifices as sharp pangs in my chest, and I understood that my compliance had only enabled their disingenuous kindness. I'd traded my voice for the illusion of support, and in return, they'd given me nothing but a polite text, asking if I was still good for mom's rent. In that moment, I saw the true cost of staying silent. The right to belong had evaporated, replaced by the cold comfort of being the invisible banker for a family that never let me in. Continuous compliance had become my undoing, and I knew then that staying silent any longer would only confirm the lie they'd written about me. I flipped through Instagram on Christmas morning, more out of habit than hope my coffee growing cold as I scrolled, until a single image jolted me upright. My cousin's holiday post, a perfect group shot of matching flannel pajamas, glowing tree lights, and beaming faces clustered together. There they were, Mom handing out mugs of cocoa, Dad wrapped around my sister's shoulder, Melissa and Jack, swapping goofy grins, and even the family dog sporting tiny antler headbands. All of them tagged, all of them celebrating, and me nowhere in sight. My heart pounded as I zoomed in on the dated 2024 ornament nestled on the mantle, making it undeniable they hadn't canceled Christmas. They'd canceled me. A hot knot of betrayal tightened in my chest, and suddenly every text I'd sent, every quiet all right, felt like a foolish offer of my own erasure. I watched videos of their evening charades in the living room, carols around the piano, my dad's laugh echoing as he spun my sister in a slow dance. Moments I'd sacrificed sleep and rent money to preserve, now showcased as if I didn't exist. In that instant, the illusion shattered my silence, had allowed a convenient fiction, and social media had revealed their truth. I didn't rush to comment or confront. Instead, I sat with the image burning its false narrative into my mind, the pixels confirming what my instincts told me all along. Their curation of a simple Christmas had been a ruse, a stage production meant to exclude me while they played at Unity. Beneath the Four Seasons greetings and nostalgic captions lay a more insidious message: my presence was optional unless it served their image. It wasn't just hurt, it was indignity to have my support system reshape my reality into a lie and display it to the world, tagging each other in gratitude for the festivity they'd quietly denied me. As the chorus of likes swelled on that post, I realized how powerful omission can be, how a curated frame can rewrite the past and dictate who belongs. In those moments, I knew my next step had to shatter their narrative, not with anger, but with clarity, asserting my worth beyond their social media facade. The holiday highlight reel had outed their deception. Now, it was time to reclaim my own story. The next morning, when my sister's curt text popped up, "You're still good for mom's rent this month, right?" Something inside me snapped. I tapped sure, but never hit send. instead opening my banking app, canceling the auto payment, and slamming block on her card. My hands shook as I left a single voicemail on my mom's phone. Spend time with your real support system. It was barely 9, but before 10, I had 34 missed calls and 15 texts flooding in questions, guilt trips, panic. I ignored them all. I made myself a strong cup of coffee, cranked up the stereo, and went for a walk in the crisp winter air, letting the sun warm my face as I replayed every sacrifice I'd made for a family that had no trouble pretending I didn't exist. Their desperation didn't sway me. In fact, it crystallized my resolve. Each missed call felt like another voice demanding I pick up the phone and resume my role as the silent provider. Instead, I walked farther, passing lights twinkling in windows where someone else's Christmas hadn't been canceled. By the time I returned home, their messages had shifted from confusion. Why would you do this to outrage? You're acting like we're the villains to sobbing, please, please, we need you. But I was done. I spent the afternoon drafting a concise email. No apologies, no explanations, just a statement that I would no longer underwrite their lifestyle or enable their lies. I hit send and felt a rush of clarity. I was reclaiming my boundaries, my money, and my dignity. That evening brought more calls, friends and distant cousins asking if I was okay, followed by a gentle message from my cousin Melissa, who confessed she'd seen the social media photos and realized how I'd been gaslit. Her solidarity was balm to the wounds of betrayal. As I sipped tea and watched the sun dip below the horizon, I recognized the quiet power of standing up for myself. I didn't need to rescue a family that didn't value me. I needed to invest in the connections that did. My rent rebellion wasn't just about withholding funds. It was a declaration that my generosity wasn't a bottomless pit. For the first time in years, I felt myself return no longer stretched thin by unreciprocated obligations, but grounded in self-respect and the comforting knowledge that real family shows up when you stop showing up on command. The very next morning, I woke to a tsunami of notifications. A panic wave I could feel vibrating in my chest before I even glanced at my phone. 34 missed calls, 15 urgent texts, and a barrage of frantic voicemails from my mom's sister. Even my dad, each one more desperate than the last. Please respond, they begged. What's happening? I poured a cup of coffee, its warmth doing little to calm the adrenaline surging through me. As I stood at the kitchen window, I watched snowflakes drift down, each one unique and impossible to catch, just like the illusion of my family's concern. My heart pounded as their messages shifted. Gear confusion turned to hurt. Feelings hurt turned to accusations. Accusations degenerated into guilt trips. How could you, they demanded, after everything we've done for you? But as their voices clamored for attention, I felt an unexpected stillness settle inside me, a rock I could plant my feet on. I replayed every moment, the hollow, too expensive text on December 3rd, the matching pajamas plastered all over Instagram, the quiet emptiness of my Christmas Eve. I remembered how I'd swallowed my disappointment, how I'd covered their rent without fanfare, how I'd been their silent safety net. And now they were panicking because I'd finally let go. Their fear was palpable through the screen, my mom's voice cracking as she begged me to call my sister's text, shrieking, "This isn't funny," and my dad's soft plea, "Let's talk this through." But I realized this tidal wave of desperation was not about me. It was about their loss of control. I stepped outside into the chill, the cold air shocking me into clarity. Each breath reinforced the boundary I'd drawn: no more invisible labor, no more silent compliance. I let the snow swirl around me, a clean reset. By afternoon, the messages slowed to a few scattered attempts, pleas, apologies, half-formed awkward silences. I didn't block them. Instead, I simply didn't pick up. Their panic wave receded, leaving behind a quiet truth. They only truly noticed me when I stopped enabling them. That evening, I sat down and sent a calm but firm text. I'm here for real connection, not crisis bailouts. I'll talk when you can respect my boundaries. Then I closed my eyes, feeling the last ripples of panic dissolve, replaced by something I hadn't felt in years: peace. In the days after I rode out that panic wave, I found myself reaching for my phone, not when my blood relatives called, but when messages from my chosen family began to ping in, Melissa checking in with goofy gifs, Jack sending me links to a houseplant subscription box, so I'd remember to water something other than my existential dread, and Aunt Rachel dropping off a thermos of homemade soup just because. That's when it hit me. While my parents and sister were scrambling to salvage a version of family built on obligation and financial bailouts, these people were showing up simply because they loved me. My cousin Melissa surprised me at my door unannounced, winter boots crunching in my entryway, with a stack of board games she'd thrifted for a game night intervention, on a night when I was too exhausted even to microwave leftovers. Jack, who I hadn't heard from since high school graduation, texted me from halfway across the country with a plane ticket and the promise of a sunny reunion. No ulterior motive, no hidden agenda, just a long weekend in Mexico, where everyone agreed to leave credit cards at home and split the tab evenly. Aunt Rachel quietly became my go-to crisis counselor, dropping off strawberry rhubarb pies at 7:00 a.m. because sugar and warmth are her love language. It wasn't choreographed or conditional. It was spontaneous, genuine. They didn't need a will to dictate their loyalty. They chose me over and over with every call, text, and unexpected knock on my door. When I finally told them about my parents' attempt to erase me at Christmas, they bristled with outrage, not because I was their cousin or nephew, but because they saw how badly I'd been treated, and they refused to let me face that alone. In that moment, I understood that family isn't defined by the closeness of blood or shared property. It's the people who see you respect your boundaries and cheer when you set them. As a group, we started a new tradition every month, regardless of holiday or crisis. We'd gather for potluck dinners. No pressure, no passive-aggressive demands, just homemade food and unguarded laughter. My chosen family didn't cancel their invitations when it suited them. They held the door open even when I hesitated to cross the threshold. Their support wasn't a transaction. It was a declaration that I mattered beyond my bank account or holiday presents. And in embracing them, I found a sense of belonging that no amount of forced Yuletide cheer could ever replicate. When my birthday rolled around 2 days after New Year's resolutions faded, I realized I didn't want another lonely night of takeout and reruns. So I did something I'd never done before. I broke away completely. I booked a one-way ticket to Hawaii, not for me alone, but for the little found family trio who'd refused to let me drown in my own bitterness. Melissa, Jack, and Aunt Rachel. The morning we met at the airport, we looked like an unlikely island invasion. Melissa's bright floral dress clashing cheerfully with Jack's neon aloha shirt and Aunt Rachel's wide-brimmed sun hat. As soon as we cleared security, we toasted with mediocre airport coffee, and I felt that tight knot in my chest start to loosen. We landed on Oahu just as the sky was flush with sunrise and the humid breeze smelled like promise. Over the next 48 hours, there was no awkward small talk, no grudging apologies, just us stomping through tide pools, collecting oddly shaped shells for souvenirs, and losing ourselves in the roar of the Pacific. Jack dared me to paddle out on a borrowed paddleboard, and of course I fell off within seconds, splashing everyone in sight. Melissa couldn't stop laughing, and Aunt Rachel helped me stand back up, red-faced but grinning. That night, we hiked up to a cliffside overlook, past torches that lined the trail like lighthouses in the dark, and when we reached the top, the city lights glittered beneath a ceiling of stars. We shared a small store-bought cake, because no one needs grand theatrics to feel celebrated, candles flickering in the wind. We each made a quiet wish, and I tucked away the sound of their laughter, the warmth of their hoop-arm hugs. We didn't post a single photo online. This escape was ours alone, impervious to social media's expectations. On the flight home, I realized I was lighter, like the suitcase stuffed with sun-bleached towels and salty hats weighed less than when I boarded. Back in my apartment, the hum of traffic and distant sirens felt less suffocating, because I knew there were people out there who'd pick me up if I fell, who'd charter plane tickets just to celebrate me, and who'd refuse to let me cancel my own special days. That birthday wasn't a retreat from life's challenges. It was a declaration that I could choose who showed up where I belonged and how I celebrated the years I'd earned. And for the first time in a long time, I couldn't wait to see what I'd do next. After we returned from Hawaii, the chatter evaporated almost instantly. No more guilt-laden texts, no more frantic phone calls demanding explanations or begging forgiveness. At first, the quiet felt strange, almost disorienting. I'd grown so accustomed to the constant static of passive-aggressive barbs and half-truths, the relentless undercurrent of obligation and expectation, that its absence felt like stepping off a speeding train. But as days passed, I began to realize that their silence was the clearest signal I'd ever received. They were finished recruiting me for their dramas, and I was finally free to write my own story. I woke up one morning, without that tightening in my chest, poured coffee without checking my phone first, and listened to the hum of the city as if it were a lullaby rather than a background roar of worry. Without the constant reminders that I was the responsible one, or the backup plan, I discovered I had room to breathe, room to dream. I could rearrange my furniture on a whim, leave the dishes in the sink until I felt like tackling them, even sleep in on a Saturday without guilt. Most unexpectedly, the emptiness my parents left in their wake invited new connections to fill it, late-night calls from friends who checked in just to see how I was, without asking for anything in return. A surprise invitation to join a hiking group, a message from a neighbor offering to water my plants during my next trip. Silence, it turned out, was a gift, an unspoken blessing that said, "We trust you to manage your own life, even if distances grow." In that hush, I found clarity. I understood that my value wasn't measured by how much I gave, but by who I was when I chose freely to share my time and energy. The loudest lesson they taught me wasn't in their lectures or their manipulations. It was in their disappearance from the battlefield, leaving me victorious and surprised that the war had ended so quietly. And now, as I plan my next birthday, or perhaps simply the next regular Tuesday, I won't clutter my calendar with obligations that feel like chains. I'll choose the people whose presence enriches my life, not those who demand payment in loyalty or perfect behavior, because sometimes the most profound demonstration of love isn't in keeping score, but in allowing the ones we claim to care for the space to grow beyond our expectations, and letting their silence speak volumes. The final step in reclaiming my life came quietly, not with fanfare, but with deliberate intent, cutting the last strings that bound me to a family defined more by obligation than by genuine connection. I began by clearing out my phone, deleting my parents' and sisters' numbers, erasing their names from my contacts, so their calls would no longer pop up in the bleary haze of early mornings, or the hollow stillness of late nights. I updated my voicemail greeting to something simple and kind, without any hidden subtext, just a friendly note that I wasn't accepting messages at the moment. I canceled the auto withdrawal that had quietly sent rent money to my mom each month, a small act of self-respect that felt surprisingly powerful. I would no longer finance apologies or coaxing calls disguised as family emergencies. Next, I changed the passwords on every shared streaming service and joint account, slipping them out of their hands and into the safety of my own digital vault. No more surprise overages or heartless reminders that I was the safety net. Now, I alone would decide where my resources went. I even unsubscribed from the email list my dad's real estate agent had once added me to, deleting the newsletters about perfect family homes that had felt so mocking when they'd tried to sell me short of my own life. Throughout this process, I felt waves of doubt. Was I being too harsh, too irreversible? But each time I hesitated, I remembered how hollow their empty apologies sounded, how eagerly they reinserted themselves only when they needed something, so I held fast. I told my chosen family, Jack, Melissa, Aunt Rachel, what I was doing, not to alarm them, but to share the liberation I felt. And they celebrated, with a spontaneous backyard barbecue laughter, echoing in a way that felt fully deserved. By the time I'd flipped the final switch, the one that blacklisted my parents' email addresses from my inbox, I realized something unexpected. My chest no longer ached with anticipation of their next request or excuse. Instead, I was light buoyed by the certainty that no matter what happened, I was the architect of my own life. Cutting those last strings didn't feel like severing a familial bond, so much as releasing myself from an invisible trap. The world beyond my front door seemed brighter, filled with possibilities that weren't tethered to someone else's drama or expectations. And in that freedom, I finally heard my own heart beat again, steady and glad, ready to guide me toward a future defined not by who demanded my time and energy, but by who truly cherished my presence. Every step I took to reclaim my peace, canceling rent, changing passwords, deleting contacts, was more than just cleaning house. It was a celebration of self-worth, a promise to never again let guilt dictate my day. In that stillness, I rediscovered the simple joy of waking up without dread of answering only to myself and the people who lift me up, rather than lean on me. The relief was profound. My home, once a stage for performance and passive-aggressive pleas, became once again the sanctuary my mom intended it to be. I learned that boundaries aren't barricades, but lifelines guiding us toward relationships built on mutual respect instead of obligation. And in choosing my cousins and aunt, those who showed up, offered sandwiches and sympathy, and laughed with me under the Hawaiian sun, I found a family that values me for who I am, not what I can provide. If you've ever felt sidelined, exhausted from doing all the giving without any receiving, remember, you deserve a seat at the table. You pay to keep warm. Start by naming one boundary you need today, whether it's muting a conversation, saying no to a request, or simply stepping away from the phone, and honor it. If this story resonated with you, hit subscribe and share your own experiences in the comments. Let's build a community where real support is the only tradition we uphold.